I give a fuck? Why do I give a fuck? Why do I try so hard? Why do I care so much?
Welcome to Why Do I Give a Fuck? A cross-cultural conversation between myself, Diane Tate,
and Johanna Thompson. In these times of great struggle and possible shift, we ask ourselves,
why do we give a fuck about any of it? How does the lens we see the world through impact what we see?
And what do we do about it? We always start with the laughter because as we are talking about what it is that we want to talk about, we come up with these good ideas and then say, wait, we have to turn on the recording. So that's just a little bit of background about what we're doing. And what we're talking about is the militarization and what the narrative is of like the visibility of the militarization that's happening with the National Guard being called in our state capital. And what that looks like is if you can bring the military in on your own citizens, imagine what it is when your military power goes out side of your nation and starts wars with others. And so I think that there is like an underlying narrative that is being built up about the superpower of the United States military and to be thinking about us as a military power that you do not want to mess with, especially as we're being allies to what Israel is doing and to all of the harm that's happening in the other places that I don't have as much knowledge about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting to me how this country has always glamorized the military. And if I think about my fiance now, I can say, and I have been watching this documentary, I guess it's maybe just a couple of different, I don't know how many episodes, maybe 2 episodes, 2 hours long, called Sitting Bull on Hulu. And really just outlining the narrative and telling the story about how Sitting Bull and the tribal nations had to fight the white expansion of the settlers into their territory. And I think about the militias, and I think about how this country has always used this military might to crush and destroy that which they want to eradicate so that they can take over. And I think about how when we meet someone who's been in the military, we've been trained, our first thing is to say, thank you for your
Thank
service.
you for your service. Always. Yeah.
And I believe in that because I believe that, we don't have a draft any longer. People are choosing to sign up, and maybe not, and it still feels icky to me to say thank you for your service because I am so against the military industrial complex. I don't, I mean, I understand that the history of this country, especially after the draft was over, this country created a set of circumstances where the poor and low income, low wealth folks were incentivized to go into the military because that was their way to get, the GI Bill and all of those things. That was their way of getting out of maybe a set of circumstances that they wanted to get out of and see the world.
Certain people
Right,
benefited from
right,
this.
right.
Let's talk about that. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. It was incentivized to people that didn't look like me, but also poor and
No,
people that
more.
did look like me.
Okay. Hold
Yeah.
on. We're going to talk about that in a minute. We're going to roll that back.
Okay.
Finish what you were saying.
Well, I just know that I know there was intention behind that, is what I'm trying to say. I know there was intention. I remember when my daughter was coming of age and stuff, and she was like, I don't want them to instill the draft. I don't want them to instill the draft. And I said, they're not going to, because the people that are in power don't want their children to have to serve. And so they're never, I don't believe they'll ever install the draft again because they don't want it to be an even playing field of who goes to war.
Yeah.
They're too into creating wars because wars are such big money makers. So if all of a sudden their kids and grandkids would have to serve, then that's going to change the whole playing field for them. So anyway, I'm rambling. I don't I don't know
No,
what
you're not
I'm
rambling. But this is an interesting conversation because I do want to talk about the military. I do want to talk about our being cultured to thank people for our service. I have a really, 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 really good friend who is high up in the military, and I know some other people who have done the military. And it's an interesting thing for people who migrate to the United States, especially from this island, from Jamaica, and join the military as a means to be able to like have some financial sustainability and some sustainability with your citizenship in the United States, right? So
Yeah.
participating in the army. But I do want to go back to this conversation about the internal struggle that we have with our military, because not only is our military used to go into other countries,
Mm.
it also creates and holds safety for countries that might, for the, again, this military, for people to have this narrative of the United States of having a really strong military power,
Mhm.
and then allowing us to live on U.S. territory in
Mhm.
the comfort and safety that we live in. So like there is this internal struggle. Like as a female bodied human being, my the priority that I live with is safety. Like that's my priority. Like
Right. Okay.
all that's the my first thought is like not love, it's not money, it's not none of that stuff. It's like how do I exist in this body, in this world, in
Mhm.
safety? And
Right.
so if we're thinking about the United States, as a feminine body thing, right? Wanting to have this very strong, and another metaphor that we're going into, wanting to have this really strong protective presence is very real.
Mhm.
That is my thank you for this service.
Uh,
Thank you for this making it that when I'm on US territory, I feel like I can go out in the streets. I'm not like the folks in Palestine right now who are trying to figure out where they're going to live because a bomb is dropping. I
right.
also on US territory don't ever think about a bomb dropping. You know what I mean? So which is why when a plane even goes into a building or something like that, it's so traumatic to all of us because we live in the privilege of protection when
Yes.
we're on US territory. So it's
Yeah.
very important to be thinking about the military in that space and not in the military as like a violent invader in other spaces.
Hmm.
And then not only is a violent invader in other spaces, when the US goes in, and I'm not sure how often this actually happens because the US is not really going to move unless there's some type of benefit to it, especially moving military power. But when the US goes into a country that may have even asked for our support or help to try to help stabilize the situation, I think that there is some really important utility in that. Again, creating safety and protection for the people that might not have those resources.
Hmm.
It's when we're going in and when we are supporting the level of violence and harm we see like a genocide, and folks know that they can move forward in a genocide because they have the backing of this super military power.
Hmm.
That's the ick. That's not, and I don't think that anybody who is serving, because I do appreciate all of the people who sacrifice themselves in that way. I don't think that anybody who is serving, I don't get the same narrative as we get as from other military powers that we know are creating the level of violence and harm.
Mm.
There's also something internally that is socially cultured in the United States with the social relationships that happen in the military, because I know that there's a lot of violence and harm that happens to people at different levels of the within the hierarchy.
Yes.
Of being a female-bodied person, being a non-gendered person, and I don't believe that they are allowed to be in the army at this point in time.
Gender are not allowed in the
Yeah,
military, but I don't
in the
know about
military.
non-binary. I don't know if that's an all-encompassing or yeah.
Yeah, but still not accepting all the people who want to be in that position of
Right.
serving. So like all of like this the inequitable and unequal social culture that happens, that is the type of thing that translates to when the United States is making themselves very present in other global entities. If you have that kind of internal disregard for value of humans, that's the type of things that you're going to also experience. Those are the ick spaces of our military.
Yeah.
So I don't see our military in the same way that I see the experience of law enforcement harming, doing harm and violence to communities in
Yeah.
in the U.S. And so when
Yeah.
we think about our
That's
military,
essential. Yeah.
it's a
Important.
really
Because to
hard
me,
road
it's
to hoe for
cab
me.
all day long, and so
Hmm.
yeah, you're right. I'm probably conflating to an extent the military and our policing system here in the U.S.
Yeah, there's two distinctions. And then I wanted to roll it back. So when we're talking about the benefits of participating in the military, when those bills and everything came out, the folks who actually benefited did look like you. And the
Yeah.
folks that didn't look like you didn't get all of those
Right.
benefits.
Yes.
Like
Thank
all
you.
of the
Thank you.
housing, all of the education, all of the health benefits and supports. Folks that are not who have participated in the US military throughout the history of the military, folks who are non-white struggle to have the same level of benefits as white identified humans in the military. And that's crazy because a soldier is supposed to be a soldier. You know what I mean? So like depending, it doesn't matter which economic background you come from, what ethnic identity you have. If you have joined the military, the understanding within the hierarchy is that you're a soldier and your ranking, your benefits come from how you're ranked, not the way that you look. But because the United States exists under racial hierarchies, you still get the same level of outcomes. So some people benefit. Again, what is your entry point into the system, into the machine? Some people benefit, but a majority of the people who really benefit from the US military do look like you. And I just want that to be clear as
Yeah.
we have our as
Yes.
we have
Yeah.
this
No,
discussion.
you're right. Thank you for that pushback. I was on a roll and wasn't thinking about what I was saying. So, yeah, I mean, after World War II, black soldiers were coming home after serving and getting the tar beat out of them and sometimes killed just for wearing their uniform, because they
Mhm.
were coming back to such a racially charged and segregated situation, and they were not. It was
They were not getting the housing. They were not getting the
not
education.
getting,
They
yeah,
couldn't
they
go to
weren't
schools
getting
when there
right.
was entire communities, military communities and housing that was being built for soldiers.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and then women in the military have struggled
Oh, yeah.
tremendously. They've struggled with violence. They've struggled with positionality. They've struggled with all kinds of things, and that is continuous to this day. And
Yeah.
like I said, we can't even mention like the non gendered human being or people who
Right.
choose different genders outside of male and
Yeah.
female
Yeah. Yeah.
in the military. And a soldier is supposed to be a soldier. So like again, you have like you have one narrative, but then an actual experience, which is very real.
Yeah, and then we add to that the fact that now our military, which we typically expect to be in other lands and in other places, asserting whatever power and dominion our administration deems appropriate at the time, are now on the streets of this country, are
Of the
now
United States.
in the United States in some of our, right now in the capital.
Pushing the white agenda. Can we just name the thing that is
Oh yeah.
happening?
Oh yeah.
Just
Absolutely
out
pushing
there
forward.
pushing the white agenda. They're pushing the white agenda on US territory because um, there is a shift in what the population looks like in the United States. They're pushing the white agenda globally whenever you're going to, and not only that, within white supremacy, within, how that proliferates to different, like all of these things, like US narrative and US culture is really being pushed across the world in the same way that England did it
Yes.
before.
Yeah, this is not new.
Um,
There is a
this is not
playbook.
new.
There's a very specific playbook. I wonder,
And we speak to the soft power that is also happening because like those are not the only contenders that are like in the playing field right now. You always have this large presence from Asia that is coming in and that is building infrastructure and that is filtrating like economics in different countries and creating stability in a different way than this very oppressive, violent way that the United States always moves forward with.
do you think the narrative around the military industrial complex will change at all given that they are now being deployed in US cities? And if so, what do you think that looks
In
like?
in what way are you asking that question? So
I'm
like as
if you
mhm,
because we're talking about the narrative and how we feel about the U.S. military and and I think one of the things that sparked this conversation was you and I saying that that the world is used to seeing the U.S. take our military and put it into other people's
other
lands to
places.
do X, Y, and Z, and
Hmm.
now they are deploying them on our own streets against our own people, and I wonder what you think, if you have an opinion or a thought about how that might impact. I mean, I think you said at the outset that it would serve to make this country's military seem more powerful. But I wonder if it might have the opposite effect. I mean, it might be that some of what is driving the US military being deployed against its own people is to show this show of strength to the rest of
of
the.
strength.
But I wonder if that's going to backfire. I wonder if you think,
Well, it's backfiring, right? Because there's more military presence in Washington, D.C., and then there's more U.S. citizens that are like, "What? No, we're not doing this. We're not doing this with ICE." And I
I,
don't,
I guess
I
I'm
have
thinking
not
about the
heard.
people in the rest of the world. If you feel like the folks watching what's happening
Mhm.
on the streets in the US now, if it will impact the narrative about how the US is seen through everybody else's lens.
Well, first of all, the U.S. is being witnessed as the tyrant that it is.
Right, right.
Right. So like that's I live on a whole in a whole different nation. I have conversations with people who come through here, and the
Hmm.
US is a big tyrant joke at this like we are not the US of the past that everybody wants to. It's like those are crazy. Y'all are crazy people over there over there. We don't know what's going on. To your point, empire is falling.
Yeah,
US empire is actually falling. It does not hold the same strength. It holds the same culture because people still are attracted to how accessible everything is to the
right.
US. And that's capitalism. Capitalism
Yeah,
still catches people because we like the stuff that we like, and
yeah,
capitalism provides us, supply and demand type of situation. But the way that the US is seen as coming in with some type of fair balance, I think that that has shifted. And I also think that the visibility of the military presence creates a militarized state. So the US is not being seen as a free nation, it's being seen as a militarized state at this point in time. So
yeah,
democracy is being eroded because now it's a militarized state.
yeah.
And so citizens who want to exist in their in their freedoms, in their own autonomy, having this type of like militarization is going to cause some pushback. We are seeing it already. We're seeing folks saying that they don't want the National Guard in because the National Guard is not coming to help with a disaster, which is when we do want them there. You know what I mean? We're not seeing them positioned in support of community. We're seeing them positioned in opposition of community.
Right.
And then for the globe to be witnessing, for other nations to be witnessing, oh, if they're going to call their National Guard on other people, what can we imagine they're going to do to us if they
Mhm,
come across the waters to where we are? They're
mhm.
not going to have they're not having consideration of their own. We cannot expect them to have any consideration of us. So
Yeah,
there's not going to be a it's not going to be a welcome desire to play with the US. And I do think that that is the way that this administration likes to hand their cards. Don't play with us because
yeah,
we big and bad.
yeah,
We're tyrants. We like we don't care and we're big and bad. Um
yeah,
I hate that. I
yeah.
hate that. Like that's nothing that I want to be a part of or associated with in any way, shape, or form.
Out. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, to our earlier conversation about narcissism and addiction and enablers. Um, Not that they care. I don't think they care at all about their image around the world, but that's what we mean to those that are listening about empire falling, or at least that's what I mean, is not necessarily it's the illusion. The US
Mhm.
has always had this illusion of being the hegemonic power, being the biggest and baddest on the block, and that's all falling. It's all eroding, as you were saying, because of what people are watching around the world, watching this latest iteration of what the US calls freedom, which you rightly titled as just the creation and the upholding of a white nationalist state. Uh,
Mhm.
and it's becoming more and more.
Militarized state. We got to add that in there. It's
Yeah.
right now, and it's being forced.
Yeah.
And white supremacy has been forced in this way. Like this is not new to
No.
the creation of the United States. This is
No.
how the United States
Moves.
became.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's how we move for sure.
hmm
I
And
don't,
then to your point of conflating like our law enforcement, again, we have different levels. What I thought that was really interesting is you speaking into how and DC, I want to reiterate this again to people. Washington, DC is not a state typical to the rest of the states in the United States. So when the Department of Transportation, which is a federal agency, pushes back on the National Guard
Mhm.
at Union Station, which is one of our major transportation hubs in Washington, DC, to say, we are returning this to our oversight.
Right.
That is like the different mechanisms and strategies that people are using to try to grasp onto this to the little bits of freedom that are still there.
Right.
And the Department of Transportation coming back under control and not having the National Guard in control of this major transportational hub then provides more benefits to citizens to be able to use the system that
Yeah, I
we
don't
pay
know what
for.
it means. I don't know if it means that the National Guard will actually physically pull out of that unions of the
Mhm. I don't
occupation.
think that I'm saying that, but I'm just saying like
Yeah,
the oversight of it. Yeah.
right. I'm just curious.
Mhm.
I'm just saying out loud that I don't, I'll be curious to see what it means.
Mhm.
Now that the DOT, the federal DOT is saying we're taking this back. It's like, okay, well, does that mean, you know, that the National Guard leaves? Does that mean, what does that mean?
Mhm.
I'll be curious to see how it develops because for those that might not be in U.S. territory, the federal Department of Transportation is part of the administration,
Yes.
is Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is the one that brought in the National Guard. So you got the phone call coming from the
Another
White House,
internal struggle. Yeah, man. You have
Yeah.
a
So
whole nother.
I'll be curious to
This
see
is the
how it.
chaos. This is the chaos that I'm
Yeah.
talking about. There's all of this like rumbling. There's this all of this instability in the way that
Yeah.
we are operating the systems that we are used to operating under this. And you spoke to this. You spoke to um, when this administration comes in, it is going to put a fire under a lot of folks' feet
Yeah.
because it's making you have to be responsive to the shifts in structure that we are used to, and that's what we need to have some type of transformation for
Yes.
sure.
I
But it's like, you know, and we're seeing that in different ways. We're seeing different strategies. Also speaking to the fact that more National Guard is being pulled into other major urban cities and communities. So we're talking about Chicago. I heard there was another state that they were talking about doing it in. Interestingly, they're not doing it in the South. They're not calling down the South yet.
Well, the somebody a lot smarter than me said at one point early on that they felt like it was more about one of the indicators for the cities that he's choosing is number one that they have black mayors,
Hmm
and which Chicago and DC both have black mayors, and I think Chicago is where he's aiming next. But the Illinois, which is the state that Chicago is in, the Illinois governor has already said, we don't want you here. You don't need to come.
hmm
We don't want the National Guard. The Illinois government is already standing,
Push it back.
10 toes down and saying, we don't want you here. I don't know if that's going to have any effect or not. So we'll see whether or not that has any impact on whether or not he still it deploys the National Guard into that city. I feel like I'd heard Baltimore maybe,
Okay,
uh,
Maryland. That makes
but
sense.
I might be, I think people are speculating a lot these days about where it's going to go next.
All
Um,
these places, by the way, are heavily populated with non-white bodies.
oh yes,
Heavily populated with
heavily
non-white
populated.
bodies. And there are also states that have these cop cities that are being built in mass in
Wouldn't be
those
surprised
areas
if
and places.
California starts to hear some rumblings about the national. I mean, they've already been deployed to
I,
LA during the uprisings, but I think
yeah,
backtrack. I think they drew them back out. I
for
could,
immigration.
yeah, about immigration. It was in why the National Guard was deployed to LA. So I don't know. I feel like they've at least backed that off a little bit. They may not be completely gone, but
Hmm
it's not as strong a presence as it was in the early days of that. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we see some Oakland would be a city that I would think would
Hmm.
be a
We're
target
pulling the
given
National
the
Guard.
demographic
Yeah,
of
for
it.
a number of reasons, because
Yeah,
it's a port city, because a lot of things are, coming in and out
right,
of that area,
right,
and it's because it's heavily populated by non-white bodies,
right,
but surrounded. So, but let's also go back to when we say that and have this discussion that for Black identified bodies on U.S. territory, it's only 13% of the population, y'all.
right.
So like even though there's a large presence of Black culture that makes it seem like there's a whole lot of Black people in the US, it's only literally 13% of the population. We are not the thing sucking the resource. I remember when I was doing my master's degree many moons ago.
Many moons ago, there comes the Jamaica coming out at you.
Many moons ago. And then what they said was that one of the things, because I was doing public administration, and so one of the things that we had to like have some foresight about is when the geography of the United States comes, and what is the social contract going to look like between, because they were saying that a majority of the folks during that time would be of a Hispanic background of some
Okay,
sort.
okay.
And so folks were like, okay, how do we start to visualize systems that would support that community? So that's the kind of
Mhm.
graduate school that I went to, which is why I loved it so much, right? It was like there's going to be a demographic shift, but how do we have the foresight to make sure that we have our system set up to like meet the needs of that community? That's how I understood it. That's how I heard it. That's how I thought about it, and
Okay.
that's some of the papers that I wrote during that time. What I am experiencing now, because they said that was going to happen 2020, we had COVID. That wasn't one of the strategies, having a
No,
super disease,
we
killing off half of the population.
didn't think about the
But
pandemic.
I didn't think about it. Yeah. And now that we're here and now that we are living and experiencing this demographic shift, the actual response from the majority, and we can't say the used to be majority population of white identified folks out in this country,
Mm,
is is the struggle that we're seeing, is like folks really feeling like not having the same amount of people power
mm,
and ideological power
mm-hmm,
that they had previously.
mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, it is such an interesting time to be alive for sure. And I have said this before, and it it's kind of a double-edged sword for me to say it out loud because I don't want anyone else to be hurt. And I truly believe that the best way for us to be a part of seeing a US that could actually be somewhat egalitarian is that someone as brazen as Trump break down as many of these systems, because so all of these systems are born out of racism and exclusion
Mhm.
and bigotry. And so how
But is the person who benefits the most from these systems going to actually want to break them down?
no, of course not. That's the silver lining to his to the chaos that he brings, to that vibrational shaking that you're feeling, is the more he breaks down. I was saying this to somebody the other day. I'm projecting to like when and if we
Hmm.
can ever get him out of office. And I know that's a big if. But I'm projecting to
Then I think that somebody is going to, what how we say on this island, dead him.
that would be no,
Whoops.
not advocating violence, not advocating violence. But when and if he leaves, when and if he's no
Mhm.
longer in the position of power he's in, the more stuff that he breaks in the time that he's together, because again, we've talked about familiar and how, you know, the systems that we had in place before he came back into office the second time were death by a thousand cuts. They were still just as destructive, but it wasn't
Mhm.
small, but it wasn't as large feeling as it is now, as we see
So
him.
what do you think? What do you think that he's breaking within our social structures
Well, I mean, he's breaking the way our departments are.
or the administration? Because it's not just he don't have that much power, so we're not going to give him that much power.
No,
He's
it's
sitting in a powerful position, but he has a whole bunch of people working with him. So what are these folks breaking?
Well, I mean, I think they're breaking the access to even more so breaking the access to fair treatment. If not that we even had that. I mean, none of all of these things I'm saying were broken beforehand. I'm not saying they weren't, but there was
Okay.
an illusion that they worked. There was an illusion that the judicial
Yes.
system worked. There was an illusion that the health access to healthcare worked. There was an illusion that access to social services worked. None of it did. Um, but he's breaking them even more by saying, okay, we're not going to do that anymore. We're not going to fund those things anymore. We're going to tear down the Department of Education. We're going to tear down the, you
So
know,
he's tearing down the social fabric, is he?
dismantling these systems that
Mm,
didn't work before, certainly didn't work on an egalitarian and any egalitarian level. But he's going even further to say, let's just get rid of them. We don't need them anymore. It's wasteful. It's whatever. So fast forward to when we actually get him out of office and the rebuilding starts, reconstruction. We've seen that before, right? If
hmm.
this stuff is broken beyond repair, if he dismantles the Department of Education, let's use that as an example. Education system doesn't work. It's broken, in six ways to Sunday. Well, it's not broken. It's behaving
It's
exactly.
educating people into being
Yeah, so it's
into
not
the
broken,
slave debt system.
but
Yeah.
it's certainly not equitable. It's certainly not equitable in its accessibility. It's not equitable in what it's teaching. So if he destroys the Department of Education and then we are able to get him out of office, whoever is in office afterwards is potentially has the opportunity to rebuild it. If it's
Mm,
completely gone, then rebuilding it could look, I'm not saying it will, and it's going to be a hard fight, but could look like we actually might get a department head that works for more people than just the people that look like me, that works for actually teaching and expanding on thought, like you were saying, is what
yeah.
education is supposed to be, instead of teaching false narratives and teaching, stories that only support the dominant culture and all of that. That's what I'm hoping. If there's a silver lining, that's what I'm hoping for, is that he will break things down in such a way that even the people that were comfortable with how fucked up things were before will actually get an opportunity to rebuild it in a way with minds and
Mm.
knowledge and understanding and narrative. And I know that sounds Pollyanna and it's coming out of a place of
But
privilege,
it doesn't, though. It
but
sounds like an organizer's mind thinking.
can't it wasn't working before. All of these things were death by a thousand cuts to people that didn't look like me. And the people that were comfortable in how that death by a thousand cuts was still happening didn't have it was the familiar, right? We even
Hmm.
if it's
The
toxic,
absolute
the familiar,
familiarity of systems.
it's comfortable. It's I've got a blanket around me. I don't want to rock the boat because we don't know what the unknown could look like, and that's scary to me. So that to me is the silver lining, that he might actually break this shit so badly that when the next person gets in, and I know that's an if, we might actually be able to build it from a foundational structure up, like because it'll all be gone. The Department of Ed is gone. We can reimagine it. What could it look like? We know what didn't work. We know it wasn't egalitarian. We know that what wasn't open accessibility to everybody. We know that narratives were being pushed that weren't real. How do we guard against that by creating something new?
Hmm.
That's my
No,
hope.
that's a wonderful hope.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm understanding and experiencing the agenda of Project 2025 and all of these things is
yeah.
that you're breaking down the social fabric to rebuild the white nation that has been broken.
Right, right.
And you're not only doing that on U.S. territory, but like Israel and what's happened. Israel is doing it in Palestine as like the first model. And
Right.
now, okay, we see that there's not really going to be, we're going to allow this to happen
Yeah, yeah,
700 plus days.
yeah.
And we're going to start us, we're going to start with the same model here on U.S. territory. And then if it's on U.S. territory, because the narrative that everyone holds as U.S. territory as being the superpower and having a strong dollar, not as strong as it's been, but stronger than other places,
Right.
a lot of other places. So the hope and the vision is that we're moving forward with this white nation, which means that Donald Trump could come out of office in his positionality and some other administration come in that will continue on
That's
with the
where the
strategy.
uprising of the people maybe
It's going to be necessary. We're going to have strategy that
just
is counter that shifts the way Project 2025. Because I don't even want to say counter. I want to say that shifts the way Project 2025, is continued.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, the Project 2025 and the stuff that's being instituted because of that.
That's the rebuilding right now.
Yeah,
And
and
we have to be aware of that. Like,
yeah,
we're not in social fabric is being broken down, open space to like recreate. There is a specific strategy
right.
that is happening right now to break down social fabric and rebuild it as white nation because there are not as many white folks in the US as there used to be. There's now more a, a non or Hispanic identified humans, but there's also white Hispanics that benefit from white supremacy. So it's a real shifty shift
Yeah.
that
No, I
that
appreciate that
that
it's
we're
not
working through.
just, it will be both and, that we will have to
Hmm.
be cognizant of what's been put in place and
Yeah,
the collective will to not
of the
only
people that are
make
looking.
sure those measures are eradicated, but that
Hmm.
something more egalitarian is put in its place. That's going to have to go hand in hand. It'll have to be a both and, not an either or. So,
Yeah, and people got to still be in their knowledge base of what's going on
mhm.
to determine how it is that they are going to be existing under these strategies.
I just have to say that when you slip into the Jamaican accent, it makes everything. I feel like I'm being schooled. I'm being schooled by
Well,
my ancestors.
it just
That's
happens.
really
I don't know if it's like when a real passion comes out and it's just like I don't know why. I
oh,
don't know why I'm on, but something
I love it.
that's
I
when I'm
love
like,
it.
wait, hold on a second.
I feel like that's like, oh, I gotta listen because here comes patois. I want to hear it. Well, thank you,
And
man.
that's funny because any Jamaican person be like, that's not patois.
I know, I know, I know. Only to my Mexican ear because I know you, and so. But it's funny because
I
the
understand.
longer
No, I
you're
know.
there, the more it
It
slips
comes.
in.
It
Yeah,
definitely comes in and out. It
I
comes in
love
and
it.
out.
I love it. Well, be well, my
One
friend,
love.
and we will speak again another week.
Yes,
Oh, you know
absolutely.
what? I wanted to say
Tell me.
before we end, I was looking on the analytics of who's listening to our conversation.
Yes, I love going over this roll
Yes.
call.
And shout out to Texas.
Okay, Texas is on the
Shout out to
record.
Texas. You know, for the longest time, looking at these analytics in the US, uh,
Mm,
California, Florida, and Connecticut have been the highest states of listeners. And I think that's largely because you have people in California, you moved
yeah, man.
to Jamaica from Florida, and I live in Connecticut. So, and South Carolina was, you know, because some of my peeps in South Carolina are listening. But those were
Mhm.
usually the states that were the highest listenership. And Texas is creeping
Texas
up.
want to
So
know why,
I want
man.
to say shout out to Texas.
Why free
See
Texas? How are
you. We're glad
you?
you're listening because,
We love
man,
the South. We
Texas.
love the South because we know what happens in the South is a model for what happens in the United States. So
That is true.
I
That
guess
is
it's
true. So I got to say shout out to Texas. So just wanted to
yeah.
share that little tidbit. So for all those that are
Right.
listening out there, we love you. We're glad you're
Love to hear it. All right,
Bye,
signing
my
off. Talk to
friend.
you soon. Bless all.
Why do I give a fuck? Why do
Thanks for
I
joining
give a
us.
fuck?
Until next time,
Why
as you
do I
move
try
throughout
so
your
hard?
day,
Why do I
continue to ask yourself,
Why do I give a
Why Do I
fuck?
Give a Fuck is produced in collaboration with Johanna and Diane. Music by Norwegian musician Water. See you next time.